This evening, we are here to honor the brave men and women who continue to fight every day to protect Israel and remember the 23,816 who have given their lives. We remember the 4,166 innocent men, women, and children who have been murdered by terrorists, and those who continue to live every day with the trauma of what they've been through and the loss of their loved ones. On June 11, 2003, I was on board bus number 14 in Jerusalem when an 18-year-old Palestinian terrorist boarded my bus strapped with explosives and injured over 100 of us and murdered 17 innocent people, including everyone seated and standing around me. From that experience, Strength to Strength was established, working with victims of terrorism globally to help them heal and move forward. I'm honored tonight to be able to introduce our speakers, members of Strength to Strength, and of Tikvot, an organization in Israel who works with injured soldiers and victims of terrorism doing extreme sports. Tonight, we are here to honor and remember. You will hear stories of tragedy and survival, strength and resilience. My good friend Naftali Moses, who lives in Tekoa, who made Aliyah from Long Island over 30 years ago. On March 6, 2008, his oldest son, Avram David, was murdered by terrorists in the Merkaz Harav Yeshiva at the age of 16. Then you will hear from Yaron Porter, an IDF veteran suffering from PTSD. Yaron is a hero in every sense of the word. He will share his story about the elite classified unit he served in and his story of survival. And you will hear the amazing Sherry Wise, who currently lives in Vancouver. Sherry will share with you what she was doing in Israel and how she survived a triple bombing attack on Ben Yehuda on September 4th, 1997. She will share her story, and more importantly, you will see empowerment and strength after tragedy and how to move forward and give back. We are honored to have each of them share their personal stories with us tonight.
סך הכל רצית להביא קצת אור, לראות את הים ולחזור. סך הכל רצית להבין קצת יותר, כדי להבין קצת פחות ולחיות עוד יום. מה כבר ביקשת? סך הכל להושיט ידך לעולם, לפתוח דלת חדשה, ישנה. סך הכל אתה ילד קטן שחושש מן העולם ונסגר עוד ועוד. סך הכל רצית להביא קצת דבש, לשמח את העולם, לחיות עוד יום. מה כבר ביקשת? סך הכל הושיט ידך לעולם, לפתוח דלת חדשה, שנה.
Good evening, those in Israel. Good afternoon to those west of us. I'd like to start sharing with a poem that was written by Israel's national poet in the wake of a 1903 pogrom in the community of Kishinev. As pogroms go, it wasn't horrific. As a matter of fact, only 40 or so odd people were murdered. But there happened to be a New York Times reporter nearby, and it made great waves in the newfangled electronic media of telegraph, and quickly became known. בעיר ההרגה, קום לך לך על עיר ההרגה, ובאת אל החצרות, וביניך תראה ובידך תמשש על הגדרות, ועל העצים ועל האבנים ועל גבי טיח הכתלים, את הדם הקרוש, את המוח הנקשה של החננים. Get up and go to the city of killing, and come into the courtyards, and with your eyes see and with your hands feel along the fences and the trees and the rocks and the plaster of the walls, the dried blood and hardened grain matter of the victim. Chaim Nachman Bialik starts his poem, an epic poem, going page after page after page, by telling us, if you want to understand something about tragedy, leave my words by the wayside. Kum lech lecha, get up and go and see with your own eyes, feel with your own hands what happened there. Because mere words cannot do justice to something as evil as a pogrom that took 40 innocent Jewish lives. There's no way that I can do justice with mere words, even with pictures, to what the loss of a child means. In 2008, on March 6th, was Rosh Chodesh Adar, the first day of the Hebrew month of Adar, the most joyous month in the Hebrew calendar. And a white van pulled up to Merkaz Arav Yeshiva, the flagship yeshiva of religious Zionism in the heart of Jerusalem. And out of that white van, a man came out holding a television box. He walked with a big box up the steps into the courtyard, and there were 3 students kibitzing together on the steps. They looked one at the other and made a joke. Who ordered a TV? This is the yeshiva. We don't watch television here. And out of the box came not a television, but a Kalashnikov assault rifle, a combat vest loaded with hundreds and hundreds of bullets in their magazines, 2 pistols, and more. The 18-year-old boy who was joking, Yonadav Hirschfeld, was the first one to be shot. He wasn't killed right away. He was just wounded. He managed to run inside the yeshiva from the courtyard, bleeding heavily, down 2 flights of steps. After the murder spree ended, paramedics were searching for survivors. They followed the trail of blood down the steps and were surprised that the trail doubled back, went up a few steps, and then went back down again. Later, they realized that Yonadav had dropped the Gemara that he was carrying, went back up a few steps to pick it up, and continued running down to get away from the terrorists. Unfortunately, by the time he was found, he had bled out instead. The terrorist then turned to his right in the courtyard and shot the next night's victim, Oirot, another 18-year-old, was a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. Didn't help. against the Kalashnikov at close range. Behind him was the third victim, Yonatan Eldar. Yonatan saw what was going on, and he turned to run away. He was shot in the back by the heroic terrorist. By now, after all the shooting, people outside the yeshiva realized what was going on and began to flee. Inside, however, no one was sure whether the loud noises they were hearing were fireworks, firecrackers to celebrate the new month, or shots. The terrorist opened the door to the yeshiva library, went inside, and everyone knew. His first victim didn't even have a chance to get up from the table where he was sitting and learning. 26-year-old Doron Maharata was an Ethiopian who came with his family from Ethiopia and decided while he was in high school that he wanted to come and learn at Yeshivat Merkaz Harad. And there he was, I think, for almost 10 years, studying so that he could become a rabbi to the Ethiopian community here in Israel. At 26, he was the oldest victim that night, shot down, dead before he got a chance to move. Everyone else scurried away, but there was nowhere else to run. The back door to the library had been locked. The only place to go was into the stacks, the shelves of books that mark any library. And there, my son, Abraham David, and his study partner, his Chavruta, Segev, Pneel Avichail, both 16 years old, in 10th grade, along with Neria Cohen, 9th grader, the youngest victim that night, at only 15, and Yochai Lifshitz, who was a 12th grader, 18 years old. They all ran into the stacks. The wall of the library building behind them, the stacks of the holy books they had come to study on either side. And it was there that the terrorist, walking from stack to stack to stack, found the rest of his victims that night and shot them at close range with his assault rifle. There is no way merely hearing the story can give anybody an idea of what it means to go through an experience. A few months after our children were killed, a number of the family members were sitting together with a social worker and a psychologist in a support group. And for some reason, we all began to tell the story of how we heard the news that night. Where we were, who called us, maybe we heard on the radio, and how we tracked down lead after lead after lead. And there was kind of a flow chart of possibilities that our children were still alive, even though they weren't answering their cell phones. Even though none of their friends had seen them. Even though they weren't at their grandparents, etc., etc., etc. And this flow chart of possibilities led to to only one possible conclusion, that they were among the victims. But everyone had the exact same story, that while we told the story from memory a few months down the road, it was clear that at point X or point Y, it was clear to us now that at that moment, it should have been obvious that our children had been killed. During the night, while we were looking, everyone said exactly the same thing. That thought never occurred to them. Each and every parent had the same exact feeling of not even considering until they found out for sure that their child had been among those killed. There's an apocryphal story about the Rambam, about Maimonides, who was famous not only as a Jewish scholar, but also as a physician to 1,000 years ago, to the vizier, king of Egypt. And someone said to the Rambam, who was a scientific medical practitioner, that a magician had come to town and cured a child of blindness who had been born blind and had never seen before, and was now granted the gift of sight. The Rambam, who vociferously acted against anything that reeked of mystic or magic, asked that this wonder worker, this magician, along with the child, be brought to him. It was done. And the Rambam proceeded to take out a number of colored handkerchiefs and asked the child to identify them by color. He said, here, this one is red. Here, this one is yellow. Here, this one is blue. And everyone stood around amazed. And the magician said, you see, not only is the child sighted now, but he can also see color. The Rambam just shook his head and said, you're a charlatan and a liar. Now, of course, we wouldn't be telling the story if the Rambam wasn't right. How did the Rambam know this? Because he said to the magician, someone who was born blind and now gained his sight would have no conception of what color was, even if physically they could see it. In the same way, those who have not gone through such a horrific loss can have no conception of what that means, what that feels like, how that divides one's life into all that came before and all that came after the moment that one found out that one's child was no longer among the living. Kum lech lecha al ira harika. Get up and go to the city of Kiev. Even a poet with the prowess of Chaim Nachman Bialik tells us that it is impossible to explain without actually being there. A few years ago, on what would have been my son's 24th birthday, I wrote a piece. This piece speaks about one of the pictures in the slide presentation that began with pictures of my son growing up. It's the picture of the blacksmith. And I'd like to read that piece now, and with that conclude. Old shoes. The sneaker in the picture is black leather. It has a slightly pebble texture, yet is smooth to the touch. The laces are a stretchy nylon that holds the knot well. The soles, tough black rubber, molded with stiff ridges under the arch, are attached with a band of white, separating top from bottom. I can still feel the way those shoes wrapped up and over the sides of my feet, holding strong and tight, cupping my arch from underneath. I remember how they snugged close just over my ankle for support, and the bounce that they added after a long day in work shoes. For years, lacing them up each Tuesday night was a ritual delineating the rest of the week from game time. With them began the weekly dose of pivots and passes, hit and miss shots, skin knees after loose balls, arguments, curses, laughter, elbows to the ribs, and all the general sweaty camaraderie of middle-aged basketball. At some point, after too many smashed toes, torn muscles, jammed fingers, my Tuesday evenings were given over to more sedate pursuits. The shoes got a rest. They sat gathering dust until my 16-year-old, probably without permission, decided to scavenge them from the back of my closet. On his thinner feet, there was room for 2 socks, helping to keep him warm during the hours of intense inactivity he spent sitting in the cold Beit Midrash of his school. Once we had spent our time together, hiking, biking, and playing endless rounds of one-on-one and horse, but eventually he put that aside. Instead, we learned Talmud together. No more ball for him. For nearly a year, his only pastime was Torah study. I don't know where the shoes are now. In the picture, the one sneaker lies on its side in the middle of the frame. To the left, a pair of crumpled pants, part of a curving belt freed from the waist loops, and a faded orange ribbon, a worn-out reminder of Gush Katif. On the right, spread in an uneven layer on the grouted terrazzo floor, is a thick smear of sticky, drying blood. The dark red stain is dense further from the shoe, as if a painter spread it from the far edge to the middle with a spatula, leaving off before evenly finishing the job. Someone took my old shoes off my son. Probably a medic frantically searching for some sign that this thin blonde boy, lying in a pool of blood on the cold stone floor, might have a hope, before realizing there was none. Whoever it was left them, along with the pants, on the floor, and a picture was taken. Perhaps when my son's stripped body was being zipped into its white body bag. Whoever took it had no inkling of what those shoes contained. They held more than the sweat of 100 block shots and crafty steals and hard-fought rebounds and showing my sons how to hit the backboard high from 2 steps above the baseline. More than memories of pushing and beginning to feel its year's body into the pseudo battle of head fakes and off-color jokes, which got left behind on the court each week, as aging combatants turned back into clerks and accountants and teachers. These black Nikes were passed down from a father holding on to a piece of his own youth, to a son on the cusp of adulthood, beginning to be able to literally fill his own father's shoes. Once they squeaked and skittered across the paint. Later they trod quietly before dawn from dorm room to study hall for early morning. They were on his feet that night when, bewildered by the gunshots ringing out in the library, he rose up from where he sat, pivoted right and darted between the stacks. I can imagine him pushing his chair back, standing, feeling for the grip of those rubber soles on the stone tile and making his move. The mismatch between 16-year-old high school student and full-grown, heavily armed terrorist. And then, of course, with my son's murder. Those old Nikes that played them last. All that's left of them is a picture. And the knowledge that my son salvage had, only briefly, taken a piece of me, old, sweaty, stained as it was, and made it his own. I ask myself from time to time whether a father can ever really expect. Thank you for listening.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning. Everybody can hear me? Okay. So, okay, amazing. We're on. So, my name is Yaron Porter. I'm 36 years old. I'm a disabled veteran from the Israeli Special Forces. I served in a unit, classified unit, equivalent to the Navy SEALs, Delta Force maybe, kicking the door kind of unit. I listed to the Army in 2003, served until my injury, the PTSD, in 2011. 2012, I finished with my duty. My story starts at the 18th of August. Of course, I did lots of operations, lots of activities in my unit, in my duty. But in 2011, 18th of August, was one particular event that really affects me. This is the only one that I've been injured in, not physical, of course, it's mental. So I started my day the 18th of August, 2011. It was Thursday morning, beautiful morning, middle of August. Everybody that's been in Israel, in Eilat, my hometown, it's like the high season, amazing summer and everything. I was in the reserve in this period, which means I finished with my 3 years service, and now I'm like need to do usually you do 3 weeks to 1 month a year, but in my unit you do a little bit more, around 3 to 5 months a year. But day to day, you are in your own life, you're like a civilian, you have like your business or your work, and you're doing in the reserve what we have to do in our unit. So this particular morning, I woke up. My favorite hobby is kite surfing. There was amazing wind. I went to the beach, 2-session kite surfing. For those who don't know, kite surfing, it's like a water sport, extreme sport. It's like surfing behind the kite, using the wind. So having fun, enjoying, getting back to the beach, laying down my gear, my kite surfing gear, and looking at my phone. Usually we need to be connected to our phone because in my unit, we need to be like very, very, we need to be in preparation all the time. If anything happens, we need to respond very quick. So I'm checking my phone for messages and I see a message from the unit commander. All the warriors come to the unit immediately. There is a terror attack, 3 exclamation points. And I'm looking for the word exercise, drill, practice, or something like this, and I can't find it. I understand this is the real deal. I'm asking from one of my friends to fold my kite surfing gear. I'm asking from another friend to take me, to drive my car. During the time he's driving, I'm putting my boots, my uniform, which is in my car, and driving towards my unit. On my way, I'm getting a phone call from my team leader. I served in Terror Monkeys team in my unit. It's the guy that coming from the rooftop and jumping with special equipment to the balconies and to the windows. And I'm getting a phone call from my team leader, and he's telling me, put a bullet inside your handgun. There is terrorists inside Israel already. There is casualties. There is lots of wounded. Open your eyes 360 degrees. As I told you, I've been in lots of operations and stuff. This is the first time that I got something like this. Now, I want to stop here and explain something. My unit is a little bit different. Here in the United States, you send troops and warriors, like 15, 12, 20 hours away from here to protect your country. In Israel, you're sending sometimes people a few hours to the north, to Gaza Strip, to Lebanon, to protect the country. In my unit, it's the only one, by the way, you're protecting literally your family. You're protecting your house. It's warriors that come from Eilat City and protecting Eilat City. So try to imagine that I'm driving in my car. I need to put the bullet inside my gun. I'm still inside the city, and this in this moment, and like my family is behind me. My parents, my brother is at the sea, my sister is at the mall, and I understand that there is terrorists inside Israel already. I'm putting a bullet in my gun. We're driving to the unit. We're arriving to the unit something like 15 minutes after the moment I finish kite surfing. You can tell there was mayhem, everybody running all over the place. Like there is a feeling of something big is happening. I'm putting my gear on me, the communication. I'm starting to hear from the area, casualties, wounded, there is terrorists. You understand something serious is happening. From the unit, something like 10, 12 minutes later, we arriving to the scene. Now, at the scene, I want you to imagine and to understand that this is 27 minutes after I finish kite surfing. After I finish kite surfing at the sun of Eilat, laying down my gear, 27 minutes after, I'm getting off the team vehicle, and the picture that I saw was like this. Above us, there was a helicopter, attack helicopter of the Israeli Air Force. On my right, I see a bus burning in flames. I will stop here and explain something. A bus that's coming to Eilat in the middle of August, burning in flames. For my understanding, there is 70 people inside this bus. By a miracle in the hand of God, this bus came from repairment. It was burning, but we knew it only in the evening. When we came to the scene, for my understanding as a warrior, there is 70 people burning alive inside this bus, and you can't do anything because you need to eliminate the threat, first of all. Again, I knew it only after, like I knew it in the evening. I was in a feeling when I was there until the evening. I was with the feeling that 70 people that I know, at least half of them, because it's a lot. It's a very small city, is burning alive in this bus. In the middle of the road, like in front of me, there was a Golani Brigade soldier lying on the road. I will tell you something crazy about it soon. A little bit behind me, a private car with 4 family members that murdered earlier this day by the terrorists. On my left, I see a few warriors from my unit and from the Yamam. Yamam is like the Israeli SWAT. A little bit above them, with advantage of height, 20 to 24 terrorists wearing blacks with customs of Egyptian police officers to confuse us. 10 more police officers. Now I'm trying to assess the situation. So there is 25 to 35 terrorists from my understanding. And I know there is terrorists inside Israel because of the phone call that I got from my team leader. So from my understanding, there is 35, 45, 50 terrorists. And at this particular moment that I just arrived, it's not all the units. It's like the first team. We were the first responders. So it was a crazy situation. On my back, 25 minutes behind my back, this is my family, my parents, my little brother, my sister. I'm literally protecting my family. If those terrorists pass me, for my understanding, my family is in risk. My family, my friends, my employees, my business, my kindergarten. It's literally protecting your house, your home, like in old Sparta. I told you I will tell you something crazy about the guy that was lying on the road. So here it's come. As if all what I told you is not strong enough, 27 minutes after finished kite surfing, I hear a whistle between the mountains, and the terrorists shoot a missile towards the helicopter. Now, when you shoot a missile towards the helicopter, it takes few seconds. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. In those seconds, this is the 4 or 5 first seconds that I arrived to the scene. If this rocket hitting the helicopter is exploding on me and on my team. And this was my first 5 seconds. It was very surrealistic. Of course, he missed the helicopter moved, shot back. killed this link of terrorists that shoot the missile. And from here, everything became very, very fast. Everything is like commands. Everybody know what it's supposed to do. And the fight starts from this second. As I said, everything became very, very fast. We clashed with them face to face very, very few. It was like 1-2 minutes later. They were shooting at us, we were shooting at them. By the way, we couldn't shoot at them until they shoot at us first. Like, we give them the advantage. Why? Because we are the most moral army in the world. It's not just a slogan. I can tell you from the field. They told us you can't shoot until they shoot at you, because we can injure or we can kill Egyptian police officers, which country we have a peace agreement with. So we give them the advantage. They are more than us. They have the height advantage, and they can shoot at us first, and only then we can respond. We blocked them. We blocked the attempt to invade the lot. We killed like most of them in the first attack. And then my team leader tell me, go bring the Golani Brigade soldier. Go bring the Golani Brigade soldier from the road. There is a motivation of the terrorists to bring him, to kidnap him. So I'm finding myself running under heavy fire to bring this soldier that's lying on the road. I think in my heart that I'm going to save someone's life, to bring him back to his family. And this is what holds me, because you're running to the most dangerous point, like the killing zone, the most hottest spot of the battle. The only thing that holds me, that I understand that I'm going to help bring someone alive, bring someone to his parents, sabotage the attempt of the terrorists to kidnap him inside Egypt, Gaza, who knows. And I'm running there with 3 warriors. 2 of them was in the car. Me and another one went to bring him. And as soon as I get there, we're talking about 32 minutes after I finished kite surfing. 32 minutes after I finished kite surfing, I'm standing there and I'm watching this poor soldier. Unfortunately, was dead. He got shot in his head from a very close distance from his own soldier. Friendly fire, sort of speaking. I told you, I will tell you something crazy about him. His name was Moshe Naftali. The lecture that was before my lecture, name is Naftali Moses. This is how the world is small, and how the world is a small place for our nation. Anyway, of course, I evacuate him as fast as possible. We bring him back, and no one from my team got injured or anything. It was successful, but the image that I saw that moment affected me, and we went back, everyone to his life, and it's very familiar to the Yom Hazikaron and the Memorial Day and Independence Day of the Israeli, the switch between sad to happiness. After this whole situation, I go back to my life. As I told you, I'm a civilian. This is what in the reserve. I'm owner of nightclubs, bars, restaurant. That particular evening, I went to my nightclub, and 3,000 people is dancing, drinking, having fun, and I need to do the switch. I just saw a dead body. I just evacuated that guy, and it was very, very hard for me, the switch between this to that. Although this is like the purpose of my unit will do whatever they do. They see whatever they see. So those 3,000 people won't feel threat. They can still dance and have fun and enjoy life. From this moment, I'm starting, my life is starting to be very, very difficult. Very weird things starting to happen to me. I'm starting to have very strong nightmares. Everything I built till this moment, I'm breaking it in few months. In 6 years, I built like businesses and connections and everything collapsing. I don't understand why. I don't understand why it's happening to me. Few years later, a good friend of mine that is an activist with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, told me, listen, my friend is suffering from PTSD. He connected me with a group of warriors, with a lawyer that is warrior suffering from PTSD himself and helping out others. And they literally saved my life. I was like in a black hole, in a very, very dark place. And today I'm doing the same like they did with me. I'm in a much, much better place. I help others. I track and help to rehabilitate people with severe PTSD, those with the worst cases. I'm going around the world. I'm doing lectures. I'm raising awareness, raising funds to help those guys. And this was me. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm honored to share my story with you today. I'm here to tell you the story of how I survived a triple suicide bombing on Ben Yehuda Street in 1987. When I tell people this story, I always like to start with one of my favorite quotes. So I'll do that for you. You have to have faith that there is a reason you go through certain things. I can't say I'm glad to go through pain, but in a way one must in order to gain courage and really feel joy. I grew up in Winnipeg, which is in Canada, and my dad was a dentist and my mother was a hygienist. And it seemed like dentistry was always going to be my chosen career path. I completed my education in Winnipeg and then went on to dental school in Chicago at Northwestern University. And in 1995, I moved to Vancouver to do an oral surgery residency here at Vancouver General Hospital. After I'd been a dentist about 2 years, in 1997, I was reading the Jewish Bulletin newspaper here and found an ad for a program called Dental Volunteers for Israel. I'd always wanted to go to Israel. I'd never been, and I loved the idea of being able to do something I love, dentistry, while giving back to the Jewish community and being in Israel. I called the number, but unfortunately there was a year-long waiting list, and so I put it out of my mind and continued on working here in Vancouver. A week later, Dental Volunteers for Israel called me and told me that a dentist had dropped out and there was a spot open if I could come next month. I was so excited. I was going to be working at a clinic that provided free dentistry to underprivileged children, both Arabs and Jews. I thought there's no way I should say no. But some doubt set in because there had been numerous suicide bombings in Israel around that time, including the Mechane Yehuda bombing just a few weeks earlier. I remember being at a cottage with my mom and trying to decide whether I should go and weighing the pros and cons. And I turned to her and said that I was going to go. And I actually said to her, if something's going to happen, it's going to happen. I actually said those words. I can think about that conversation to this day. Once I got to Israel, the experience of working with the children in the dental clinic was everything I hoped it would be and more. It was humbling, immensely satisfying, and it filled me with a lot of joy. Every day I worked at that clinic, I was happy. I felt like it was the best decision I've ever made. I spent a total of 3 weeks volunteering at the clinic, and on my last day, I said goodbye to all the new friends I'd made at the clinic and headed for lunch at an outdoor cafe on Ben Yehuda Street called the Village Green. Ben Yehuda is a pedestrian-only area filled with tourists and locals having lots of different places to eat lunch, and Judaica, it's beautiful. I remember thinking what a glorious day it was. I was meeting up with friends I'd met during my stay, and I planned to spend an additional 2 weeks traveling through Israel with one of them. During the lunch, I noticed a large man walk by dressed in women's clothing, carrying 2 enormous bags. It seemed strange to me, but I was so enjoying my lunch, I didn't give it another thought. Little did I know, he was one of the 3 suicide bombers strapped with nail-studded bombs, and he was about to set off the first of 3 separate explosions, only steps away from where I was sitting. A second terrorist was already setting himself up across the street in front of the Israeli discount bank. But of course, at the time, I had no idea what was going to happen. Standing in front of my table was a group of young schoolgirls, probably around 14 years old. I remember because they were so loud and excited to be there celebrating their friend's birthday. They had balloons and gifts and were singing Yom Huledet Sameach, happy birthday, at the top of their lungs. I remember thinking how happy they seemed. It was a particularly warm day and I was sitting directly in the sun, and I turned to my friend that I was having lunch with and said, would you mind switching seats with me? And she said, sure, she wanted to work on her tan. Not 2 seconds after we switched seats, the first 2 bombs exploded. One moment I was sitting in the chair, laughing, eating, and enjoying the day, and the next was I was on the ground with bodies on top of me. At first, I had no idea what occurred. I saw people screaming, but I couldn't hear anything. The explosions were so loud, I lost all my hearing. Then, as I looked over my shoulder, the third terrorist pulled the detonator of the bomb attached to his chest and blew himself up before my eyes. I can still see it so vividly. It was this bomb that caused most of my injuries. He was only 3 feet from where I was. The first thing I noticed after the bomb stopped were those schoolgirls that had been standing in front of my table. All of them had died, all of them. It was a vision I've never been able to forget and the one that haunts me most to this day. One of my friends I was sitting with was blown straight out of his seat, landed on his feet, and ended up with only a single cut to his face. In an incredible turn of events I still could not fathom as anything other than luck, fate. The girl with whom I'd switched seats with turned out to be the worst critically injured person to survive. Had I not exchanged seat, that would have been me. It was literally inches that determined who survived, who was injured, and who was killed. The streets were utter chaos. People were screaming, sirens blared, and dismembered bodies were scattered everywhere. Within minutes, hundreds of medical staff and volunteers appeared to help, tag, and identify the wounded and dead. My first instinct after the bomb was that of survival. I did not want to die. I realized during the explosion I had lost my knapsack and my passport was inside, and I began to panic because I didn't want anybody to find my knapsack and think I had died. Or if I was going to die, I wanted people to be able to identify me. After searching through bodies and body parts and debris, I found my knapsack, put it on my back, and waited for someone to come and help me. Eventually, I was tagged and brought by ambulance to the hospital. Over 15 people were murdered that day and 196 wounded, including me. I suffered 2nd and 3rd degree burns to 40% of my body, and my hair was burnt off. I had over 100 nails lodged in my arms and legs and a large bolt embedded in my left foot, and I was permanently lost most of the hearing in my right ear. I was in the hospital for 3 weeks and then was transferred back to Canada to my parents' home in Winnipeg. I required over 6 months of continuous medical care before I could come back to Vancouver and live on my own. In the Hadassah University Hospital, Mount Scopus, I stayed in a room with an Israeli girl named Ruti, who had also been severely injured in the bombing. Ruti's boyfriend took leave from the army and slept on a mattress between our beds with his gun beside him to protect us. Ruti's family became my family. Whatever they did or brought for her, they did for me. The people of Jerusalem also took care of me. Rabbi after rabbi came to visit me and say a prayer or to get my mother's name so they could pray for us at the wall. Religious women brought candles and challah so I could celebrate Shabbat. Strangers came to visit me and bring me gifts or to just say hi and ask if there was anything they could do. Ruti and I were chosen to meet Secretary of State Madeleine Albright at the time and the President of Israel Weizmann. I don't remember much of that visit except Madeleine was wearing ladybug earrings and she said she knew we were both going to be okay because we had sparkles in our eyes. Their visit to Ruti and I made the cover of the New York Times. Several years after the bombing, I became involved with a support group for victims of terrorism called Strength to Strength. You've met Sari already, who survived a bus bombing in 2003. Every year we meet in New York to share our stories, do acts of kindness, and help each other heal. I've met victims of 9/11, both survivors and family members who lost loved ones in the towers. I've met survivors of the Boston Marathon bombing, Air India bombing, the LAX airport shootings, the London subway bombing, and countless other terrorist attacks. Among all these survivors and family members, I have noticed something very interesting. Some of them have made the choice to move on from their tragedy, but others have not. Many people have never been able to resume their lives and are stuck on that very time. For a long time, that was me. When I returned to Vancouver after spending 3 months at my parents' home in Winnipeg, I spent months lying in my bed depressed. I had a lot of time to think about what had happened to me. Why me? Why me? Why me? I asked myself over and over. I needed to make sense of this terrible event, but I found that I could not. Did I deserve to be a victim of terrorism? Was I being punished for something that I had done? If that's true, what did the young schoolgirls do that had died? What had they done to deserve that? I think it's natural when something bad happens to try and blame someone, but I finally had to concede it was not my fault. The bomb blew up. I happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, and now here I was, my life changed forever, suffering for something that should have never happened. It took a year for me to resume my life and return to full-time work. Time has healed most of the physical wounds, but there are things, many things that are intangible that the terrorists took away from me that day that I will never be able to recover. I am not the same person I was before this. I still suffer tremendous survival guilt. Why did I survive and so many others did not? This is the one question I doubt I'll ever have answers to. I still suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. I have many fears associated with loud noises, crowds, and fireworks because of the booming explosions. Even all these years later, a balloon popping or a car backfiring causes my heart to pound, and my first instinct is to run away. Part of my healing process involved meeting with psychologists and talking through my experience. One thing they especially wanted to help me address was the anger they assumed I was feeling, but in fact, I never felt any anger at all. I have never harbored anger towards the terrorists. Many of you might be thinking, how is that possible? It's because I know these men were born with clean slates. They were not born with hatred in their hearts. They were born innocent, beautiful babies, just like all of us. They were taught to hate the Jews, and that being a suicide bomber was the higher honor they can achieve in life. What chance did these bombers have in life? None. These bombers were victims themselves, victims of hatred, of parents who had passed on the teachings they themselves had been taught. In my opinion, they were victims just like me. It has helped me enormously to remember that. My emotional healing hasn't been easy. I survived and others did not. I walked into a restaurant and chose a particular table, a particular chair, without any idea that my life would depend on such choices. I have had to live with the guilt of surviving, but I worked hard to make sure I did not survive in vain. It has been 22 years since the bombing took place. For me, that has meant 22 years of choosing forgiveness over anger, blame, or hatred. 22 years of trying to be a great daughter, sister, mother, and friend. 22 years of healing and of remembering those who were killed every day. 22 years of feeling grateful that I survived. 22 years of remembering just how close I came to not having this life and being able to share this story with you. I always finish my story with another quote, and it's a book that my sister and brother gave to me during my recovery called The Good Luck Book. The quote reads, "The very best thing in the world that can befall a man is to be born lucky." I often think about that quote and what happened to me. I guess some of you would say I was the unluckiest person in the world because I was at that cafe that day and experienced just trauma, pain, and suffering. But I feel like I have all the luck in the world because I survived, I healed, and I'm here sharing my story with you today. So I know I was born lucky, very lucky indeed. Thank you for listening to my story.